Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like you to welcome to the Van Zandt a fantastic band led by the world's greatest drummer. Ladies and gentlemen, Buddy Rich and his orchestra.
There you go. You just heard it. So hello to everybody out there in internet jazz land. I'm the Jazz and Blues audiophile with you this time for a special episode. An episode that, well, let's put it frankly, might be a little bit controversial. This might stir up some controversy out there in the jazz world. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure it will. Because in this episode, we're going to ask the question, was Buddy Rich truly the world's greatest drummer? Can he be regarded once and for all as the world's greatest drummer? Could we still consider him today, 33 years after his passing, as yet still the world's greatest drummer? Now that is a controversial, probably even divisive question. But I think it must be asked, and I think we must discuss Buddy, because Buddy, no matter what you think of him, no matter what opinion you form of the man himself, Buddy was a prodigious, incredible performer, an incredibly talented drummer, and he had a very, very exuberant, explosive, and enthusiastic personality about him. He left no one completely indifferent to what he was doing or what he might be saying when he was invited on interviews over the years. Now, anybody who's a little bit familiar with Buddy Rich knows this about him. Those who are not, well, I encourage you to familiarize yourself with the man. He's not a boring guy to listen to. There's plenty of interviews with him or appearances on different shows on the internet, on YouTube that you can watch. And usually they're pretty instructive and they're pretty informative. Sometimes they're even funny. And his drum performances, of course, are always quite captivating, I find. Now, when I say Buddy Rich, was he the world's greatest drummer? When I say world's greatest, what do I mean? Do I mean to say that he's the only great drummer? No, I'm not saying he's the only great drummer, obviously. Well, when I'm saying the world's greatest drummer, am I saying he's the absolute best? Nobody else could even come close to him? That's not quite what I'm saying either. There's some other very, very good drummers out there that could definitely come close to Buddy. You know, a name that springs to mind immediately when I talk about this subject of jazz drumming, of drumming in general. For me, another great, great giant of the jazz drumming world is a legendary Max Roach. Now, Max Roach, to me, is one of the world's greatest drummers. You think of Louis Bellson. You can think of Art Blakey. You can think of Philly Joe Jones. You can think of... There's so many drummers in the jazz world that you can think of that are absolutely excellent. You know, Shelly Manne, what a drummer that was, boy. Shelly Manne is a master at the brushes, you know, the brushwork. So yes, there's several great drummers, but why should we single out Buddy Rich? And how should we answer the question, was Buddy Rich the world's greatest drummer? Well, I'm going to answer it for you, and then if you disagree, well, you disagree. You can write me in the comments section down below. And by the way, in the meantime, if you like these little episodes where I present some artists or some albums that I like in jazz, feel free to subscribe in the button down below. Hit the subscription button. But nevertheless, if you don't agree with me, leave me some comments. If you do agree with me, leave me some comments. Tell me what you think. But here's why I'm going to answer this question by the affirmative. Yes, indeed, Buddy Rich was most definitely, in my opinion, the world's greatest drummer. Now, why do I say that? First of all, there is, of course, the question of the talent. The man started playing drums at 2 years old. For goodness sakes, 2 years old. Consider this for 2 seconds. His father noticed that he could keep time at 2 years old with a spoon in his hand. And his father and mother were both in vaudeville. They earned their living as a vaudeville act called, I think it was, I forget what the name was, but anyway, both his mother and father were earning their living that way. And so they decided to integrate their little son, Buddy Rich, into their act, since he could hold on to a spoon and keep rhythm. So they gave him some drumsticks and he could hold on to them and keep rhythm. And soon afterward, he started doing other things on the drums and started playing a little bit more intricate stuff and started soloing. And slowly but surely, the man developed into a full-fledged drumming machine. And anybody who has never seen Buddy Rich live, well, you've missed out on one of the great experiences in life, really. I was privileged because I got to see him 3 times before he passed away. The last time I saw him was back in 1986, just a few months before his passing. And every time I saw him, at the end of the show, he would bring the whole house down with an incredible drumming number that would just astonish the heck out of everybody that was in the audience and leave you completely flabbergasted and your jaw drops and you couldn't believe what you had seen and what you had heard. And so everybody at the end of the shows would eventually come to on their feet, get up, and give the man a standing ovation. And that's the way that most of his shows, anyway, the 3 times I saw him, that's the way the shows ended, with a standing ovation. The man was extremely talented, and you don't just take it from people who've seen him, plain people, ordinary people like me, but also from musicians. You can hear all kinds of tributes from musicians from all over the world. And he didn't, the thing is, he did not just influence musicians in the jazz realm, but he also was influential outside the jazz realm. And that is where it's very important to take note of this. And that's another of the arguments of why I say he's the world's greatest drummer. Because even outside of the jazz realm, Buddy Rich was a household name. He became a household name that was synonymous with drums and drumming and great, incredible drumming ability. A lot of rock drummers got their inspiration from him. A lot of jazz drummers, of course, were inspired by him and were influenced by him. The great Max Roach, with whom Buddy recorded an album back in 1959 called Rich vs. Roach. He's one of the few drummers, well, one of the few very important drummers, I would say, that came and paid tribute to Buddy on those 2 albums that were produced by Neil Peart of the famous Rush rock group. He produced 2 albums in 1994 and 1997, Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Burning for Buddy, which were tribute albums by the Buddy Rich Big Band and a bunch of guest drummers that were invited to come and play on that album. And one of the guest drummers that showed up was the great, the legendary, the phenomenal Max Roach, which Buddy had recorded in the past and Buddy was friends with. He came to pay tribute on on those albums, and when they offered for him to play one of Buddy's numbers, Max refused. He said he didn't want to touch any of the stuff that Buddy did out of respect for him. He says, I'm just going to play a drum solo in his honor. And so Max sat at the drums and played a number called The Drum Also Waltzes. And for me, that is the greatest acknowledgement that Buddy was a phenomenal drummer. The fact that the great legendary Max Roach would come and pay tribute to him. Of all the drummers that showed up, and a lot did, some from the rock world, some from the jazz world, the most incredible one that showed up, I think that really, really says something about Buddy's talent, is the fact that Max Roach showed up to pay this tribute. And speaking of Max Roach, another anecdote I want to say is that before they recorded this album for Mercury back in 1959, Rich versus Roach, they had a rehearsal session. And Max showed up, Buddy showed up, and it was the first time that Max was really, I think, in presence of Buddy's drumming. And apparently, I don't have the actual document stating this, but on one of those Facebook groups that I'm a member of, Buddy Rich Fan Group, one of the fans told me that he read an interview where Max Roach confided in the interview about that particular recording, that at the rehearsal session, when he first heard Buddy play the drums, he was so intimidated by the sheer skill of Buddy Rich that Max had to go and throw up in the bathroom before he could then return and continue with the recording session, the rehearsal session. So that's something right there. And Max is no little amateur drummer by any shape or sense of the word. So for Max to confide that and to say that he was so impressed by Buddy's abilities, sheer drumming abilities, that he got sick literally, that's saying something about drumming, about the drumming skill of Buddy Rich. So again, beg your pardon, this is why I'm saying, part of the reason why I'm saying that Buddy was truly the world's greatest drummer. The other reason is, let's not forget this. Buddy benefited from enormous television exposure. How many drummers do you know of any category, whether you're rock drummer, jazz drummer, whatever? How many drummers do you know that were constantly on television throughout the 60s and 70s, right up to the mid 80s? Because Buddy was very, very frequently in front of the television cameras. Why? He was, first of all, personal friends with the great Johnny Carson. The Johnny Carson Show, everybody knows that show. It was watched by millions of North Americans every night, Monday to Friday. And Buddy, being a personal friend of Johnny Carson, had pretty much carte blanche to show up anytime he'd like. Anytime he was in the vicinity of the taping of the show, he could just walk on there. He was always welcome to make an appearance and play with the Tonight Show Orchestra, which was a jazz orchestra, by the way, led by Doc Severinsen. And had also the great Snooky Young playing in that horn section. Oh boy, what a great trumpet that guy was. Anyway, so he was seen by millions of people. He was also frequently on the Merv Griffin Show, of which he was also a close friend. He was also on the Michael Douglas Show, of which he was also another friend. He was interviewed on the Today Show. He was interviewed by Larry King. He was in a Miller Beer commercial. He was on the Muppet Show. He was on all kinds of television specials or whatever, or talk shows. So that made him very, very popular to the average North American person. The average North American person knew who Buddy Rich was. Buddy Rich was a household name synonymous with drums and drumming. So that gave him an exposure that contributed to making him, once again, the world's greatest drummer. Because he was just seen by so many people. He could display his incredible skills in front of so many people and astound the hell out of people on late night television. How many other drummers had the opportunity to do that? How many drummers do you know, rock or otherwise, or jazz or whatever, that had the opportunity, had that kind of exposure on television? Almost none. I can't think of any that had that kind of exposure. And so, once again, this contributes to his enormous popularity. But there is that famous quote from Gene Krupa. They asked Gene Krupa about drummers, and Gene was sharing his opinions about all kinds of great drummers. And then when he came to Buddy Rich, he says, well, Buddy Rich, he says, that's just the greatest drummer to ever have drawn breath. Now that's one heck of a thing to say about another drumming man. Could that be possible? Well, if you don't know about that yet, if you have not seen Buddy Rich, seen and heard Buddy Rich in action, I highly suggest, if I may suggest just one audio video document that you should watch right away, go to your YouTube and go and type Buddy Rich live at the Montreal International Jazz Festival. That is something that was recorded in 1982 at the Montreal International Jazz Festival. The drum solo that he will perform on there, on West Side Story Medley, one of his classic numbers, is absolutely mind-boggling. And if that doesn't convince you that Buddy was a phenomenal, incredible drummer, worthy of the title the world's greatest drummer, and still worthy to this day. As a matter of fact, in 2012 in Modern Drummer magazine, a poll was taken, a reader's poll, and they had to vote for who they considered the world's greatest drummer. And once again, Buddy Rich came in number one. So that says a lot, I think, about the great reputation that he had, the great skill that he displayed, and everyone that saw him was an eyewitness and an audio witness to that skill. So if you can, go and check out that video, live in Montreal, and we can talk about whether or not you agree with me that Buddy Rich was indeed the world's greatest drummer. He would shy away from no other drummer. He would take on anybody, play with anybody, make a drum battle with anybody. He drum battled Art Blakey. He drum battled Max Roach. He drum battled Louis Bellson. He drum battled so many guys. It's mind-boggling. And he had mind-boggling talent to back up a lot of the stuff that he said. Now, a lot of people also, I got to mention this, are prejudiced against Buddy Rich because they heard on the internet those infamous bus tapes where Buddy Rich is mad and he's screaming at some of his band members. He's not happy with the way they perform or the way they played that night, etc., etc. He's pissed off, basically. And I say to that, that's not a way to judge a man. I mean, how many of us, if you recorded me, for instance, when I'm pissed off, when I'm mad, I would come off sounding horrible also. I would come off sounding as a terrible person, which I'm not any worse than anybody else, I don't think. So that's a bad way to judge somebody. I don't think we're all at our best. We're not our best when we're mad, we're in a bad mood or whatever. If somebody was to record us during those times, well, we probably pretty much all come off sounding pretty bad. So that's that. Second of all, some people judge him by his stage persona. You must realize that Buddy Rich, yes, he was very much self-promoting. He was very vocal also about his opinions about music, about certain musicians, and about rock music and country music in particular, which he detested. He was very vocal about that and would make his opinion known quite clearly. And sometimes it displeased a lot of people. As a matter of fact, one time he was due to play at a jazz club in Nashville. And just before he was to do that, the day before, I believe he was on a radio show, he was interviewed, and he told the interviewer that he really did not like country western music, didn't know what the heck that was all about, that he really thought that country western music should disappear from the map and jazz should take over. So the next day, somebody phoned the club where he was supposed to play in Nashville and threatened to bomb the club if Buddy Rich showed up, so he had to cancel that venue. So it just goes to show you. Those are the kinds of things that could happen to Buddy, because he would open his mouth and be very, very blunt and direct about what he thought and about his general opinions on music in general. But that was also a good side of him, because many times I heard him in interviews take the defense of jazz music and try and promote jazz music and lament about the fact that jazz was truly the one true American musical art form, the original contribution to musical art that America made, and that it was not being promoted, it was not being recognized as such in its own country of origin. And he thought that was one of the worst things, and he was absolutely horrified at the fact that great musicians like Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, and the like were not recognized and did not get their proper due and their proper recognition as contributors and creators of this wonderful and unique musical art form. Many times I heard him defend that point of view, and so that was him. That was Buddy, and Buddy had a stage persona, as I say. When the lights came on, the stage lights came on, or the television cameras came on, he would put on a showbiz act, a show business act. It was the showbiz guys that you would see on Johnny Carson, on Mike Douglas, on different shows like that, because the man was brought up in vaudeville. He literally grew up in the world of show business. And that is key to understanding what he projected when he was on the stand, when he was in front of a camera or in front of an audience of any kind. He would project someone that was, yes, very much self-promoting, because in those days, if you were in vaudeville, for instance, you had to promote yourself. You had to promote your show. You had to promote yourself as being the best, because that's the way you earn your living. I mean, if you're going to talk against yourself, that was self-defeating, of course. And yes, Buddy would push that to the limits. Yes, Buddy once, when he was asked by an interviewer, Mr. Rich, in your opinion, "Who's the world's greatest drummer?" And Buddy looked at him and replied, "Well, I am, of course." So a lot of people take offense at that and say, "Oh, but he should have been more humble. He shouldn't have answered things like that." That was part of Buddy's persona. That was part of his personality. He was a self-promoting guy, and he was never boring to listen to because he always was a little bit borderline provocateur. You know, he was a provocateur. He was provocative in his opinions and in what he would say about himself. But the thing is, he had the skills to back all the shit that he said about himself. And anybody that's seen him live and has come out of his concerts completely in literal awe can testify to that. And Buddy was in a particular class of musicians. He was in a particular class of drummers. I always say there's only three kinds of musicians. There's the musician, the first kind, is the musicians that you go and see his show and you come off disappointed at the end of the show because he's not quite as good as his record album that you listen to at home. He's actually below his record. So that's very disappointing. That kind of artist is very disappointing. Then there's the second kind of artist. There's the artist that you go and see him live, him or her live, and they're at least equal to their record. And sometimes a little bit better than their record. So that's good, you know, that's good. You get a nice show, you get a nice entertainment from that. But then there's the third kind of artist. And the third kind of artist is the one that you go and see him or her live, and you come out of that show and you cannot believe what you have heard, what you have seen, what you have experienced musically. You are just in shock and awe. And that's the kind of artist that Buddy Rich belonged to. It seems that you could not capture him on record. His recordings never did him full justice. You could not capture that man on a recording, but when you did see him perform live in person, you were witnessing something absolutely superhuman and phenomenal. And I can testify to that, my personal testimony after seeing him 3 times. Yes, Buddy Rich indeed was that kind of artist, an amazing artist, an incredible artist, an artist well deserving of the title, the world's greatest drummer. And that ends my little episode discussing Buddy Rich as the world's greatest drummer. Do you agree? Are you in disagreement? Are you frustrated? Are you mad at me saying such a thing? How can he say such a preposterous thing? Doesn't he know that there's thousands of drummers out there, blah, 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 blah? Yes, I know. Well, if you don't agree, go ahead and write me down below. Write your comment. If you do agree, write a comment and go ahead. Let's discuss it. Anyway, this was the Jazz and Blues Audiophile episode of today. And I always say before closing these little episodes, don't waste your time. Life is short. Get yourself some good jazz records to listen to. Put them on and play them during this pandemic and insanity. Listen to some great jazz. Get out there. Enjoy life. And don't forget, no matter what you do, jazz on, man. Jazz on. I'm the Jazz and Blues Audiophile. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.